Hello my friends, if you like my work, please remember to click thumb up, subscribe to my channel or hit the notification bell to be informed about new videos. I'd just like to say thank you to all my patrons, please join them if you can, the link is in the description below. In the previous episode I show how the base of Opel looks like, so today it's time to take care of weathering, assemble, paint the figures and set all the elements as I planned. The model is painted and already looks delicious, right? Generally it can be said that this is the first technical used on larger scale, unless there was something earlier that I missed. If so, let me know in the comments. Okay, we are starting on weathering. For starters, a bit of glossy varnish for easier distribution of the wash, which will appear on the model in a moment. Of course, I used the Modeler's World product, which meets all my expectations. I covered all the elements with it, more as a general rule than to make the model shine like the polished body of a new car. It's worth remembering that some elements look better when they are shiny to a greater or lesser extent. This is of course my favorite contrast. Completely matte models look strange. Maybe on vehicles it's not as visible as opposed to planes, where it's very often overdone and spoils the effect in my opinion. But that's a topic for another episode. For the first wash I used earth grime and thinner. I put it mostly on sand colors. Thanks to the glossy varnish, the wash distributed perfectly where it should, filling all the cavities and emphasizing the details. I removed the excess with a clean thinner. It's worth carefully examining the model to make sure that there are no unremoved spots anywhere, because later it will most likely be visible. In my opinion, it's even better if we remove more than leave uncleaned. The dark wash also emphasized the details and surfaces of the wooden elements and filled the gaps between the boards on the flatbed, but only where they were sewn to the color of the wood. The second wash is the color of the dust, which will be perfect to make the dust effect. Apart from that, where you can see Panzergrau that is mainly on the flak gun, I did a strong filtering of the base color so that it looked like a strong dusting of all elements. It's important during such a process to control how the product dries and avoid ugly traces of excess liquid. Just don't leave it unattended, and it's best to help the whole process with an accelerator. You probably already know what this device is. Oil paints give many possibilities to change the color intensity or even its shade, and it's worth having them in your workshop because you never know which model will need their intervention. Of course, a large number of colors is not always a good solution, and that's why I, drawing from my experience, try to approach it rationally. I don't have to brag about the number of tubes I keep in my boxes. These 3 colors you see here are enough for me to change the shade and introduce color diversity. Thanks to extended drying time, you can work quite long evaluating the effects of painting and possibly improving them by adding new shades or even removing, not completely but partially. It's important to have thinner and dry brushes at hand, which may come in handy in a rather unexpected moment. In this model, the most visible place and at the same time the best place to apply oil paints is of course the engine hood. Larger surfaces are ideal for applying color changes, and as you can see here, you can go from a dark to a very light shade. This is quite laborious and time-consuming technique, and it's worth having a little more time for it to analyze the surfaces of your model without haste and determine where discolorations and additional colors created with oil paints should be located. Although I didn't use it on this model, it's worth remembering that in addition to adding colors, you can also use these paints to build interesting effects that simulate the actions of the crew and other factors. I use them to paint the dirt near the crew hatches, but also at the edges of the doors or near the engine, because that's where the most dirt always collects. Michael Rinaldi showed it in a great way in his books. Without a doubt, they are recommendable, and I'm sure of what I'm saying because I have 4 volumes of Tankard where it's shown in a very possible way. And an interesting remark about the colors of the German armor. In the previous video I found a comment in which the author wrote that German standard RAL colors were made with base oxide pigments which couldn't fade, as the color was already as degraded as it could get. So now I leave it to your discretion how to approach the matter of painting German armor, and being aware that we are painting a model that is supposed to please the eye. As I mentioned earlier, rust will be added to the model in a minimal amount. I focused primarily on added elements, which are field conversions. I'm talking about a rack for additional jerry cans, a frame above the driver's seat and a spare wheel mount. Only these items will have a slight rust coating made by weathering paints. I covered the whole model with a thin layer of matte varnish to protect oil paints. Thanks to this I don't have to wait long to take care of the model again. The layer is thin enough on the one hand to protect the colors, but on the other you can still see the glossy varnish applied before the wash on some elements. And that's great. When we are talking about Afrika Korps vehicle, there must be dust on it. I don't think anyone will question this, and everyone who made a model from this area automatically reaches for this effect. I initially used sandy dust weathering paint to create a color base and primer for pigments. I dusted the bottom of the FLAK and the entire OPEL chassis. There was also some dust on the sides of the frame. On the flatbed, exactly where the cannon covers the boards, I copied the shape of the base. Once the armament is set up, it will be perfectly under it, so it's like it was in real life. Of course, there was also a fine cloud of dust on the wheels. Once I'm at the wheels, I will immediately start applying the pigment and getting it dirty. In short, pigment for the whole and wiping flat surfaces with a sweaty finger. Later I will improve the treat, but I will do it before the very end of work on the project. Fenders are the only place where I apply more pigment and fix it with white spirit. The rest of the chassis is only dusty and I don't fix the pigment in any way because it won't be possible to remove it from there in any way by catching the model for setting up, transport or for any other purpose. There is no need. The wheels are ready to be installed. A drop of super glue is quite enough. The most important thing is to set them evenly so that the cut of the tire adheres perfectly to the surface. I put some pigment on the upper surfaces of the model. This shouldn't be surprising, especially since the effect that can be achieved thanks to this is perfect. Powder particles after fixing create a delicate structure that looks very good in my opinion. Of course you have to be careful not to damage it because it's not super hard, but with a bit of delicacy it shouldn't be a problem. Okay guys, now a bit of self-advertising. Traditionally, and as I said in the beginning, I would like to thank again to all my current patrons. You are great guys. And you can also be one of them. It's very easy because now there is a chance to enter this superb group without pay a penny for 7 days free trial. This way you can check whether you like what I publish for my patrons or not. From the technical side you need to join for free by filling all gaps patron wants, and then you can surf on my page with no limits, watch and download all superb high resolution pictures, watch progress shots, check stories with unpublished in other media's models, read the articles and enjoy other benefits, but about the 7th day you need to decide if you stay with me or go back home. It would be superb if you join this group. Your support is highly appreciated and helps me do what I do here at coldemonspl and what I love the most. Thanks to this, I will try to give you some interesting content to keep you informed and entertained. Thank you very much. The flak gun was given a bit of metallic sheen by a bit of pencil buffing around the edges. Simple and effective, and in addition once again you can build a contrast with this effect, which is what I like the most. Well, right now I will use pieces I have from previous projects. They are dry, so I will soak them with a bit of glue and water. Contrary to appearances, camouflage was also needed in the desert, and the Germans used camouflage nets for this purpose. There are pictures where you can see different types from thick to thin with additional elements and without. I will use my own hacked way, which you may already know, but for those who are here for the first time or don't know my previous projects, the next few minutes may be useful to use on their models. The base material is medical gas, ordinary for a few pennies. Painting is very simple and all you need is paint, for example grey, green or something like that, or whatever you need for a specific project, a bit of PVA glue and water. Soak the gauze with this mixture and dry it with an accelerator or just leave it for some time. The advantage of this is that once dried, the mesh can be softened again with water and arranged in any shape. Laying the mesh on the model takes some time because you have to carefully examine it from all sides, so that its arrangement is natural and at the same time it doesn't overwhelm the model with its size. Rendering the real size of the mesh doesn't work, so it's worth making a much smaller piece. It will look 100% better. Look at the size of the mesh pieces I put on my model. Sometimes you have to work a little to get the net to lie the way you want. If the material is resistant, it's worth drying it a bit and gluing it with thick PVA glue or even CA glue to the model. This is quite radical, so before we do it, it's worth considering whether it is a good solution. I didn't use such radical steps on this model and I managed to arrange the appearance of the mesh with water and PVA glue. If you have any questions about mesh modeling, feel free to ask in the comments. The front of the vehicle, in addition to the towing cable, has also been enriched with a thick fabric rope. It's a piece of thin string from some Tamiya model which was supposed to be a towing cable, but for obvious reasons it didn't become one. Here, after lying on the model, I soaked it with PVA glue and water, but in some places I glued it to the model without water. Its appearance is quite cool and adds a bit of clutter to the vehicle. I'm letting it dry for now. Before the rope is ready for painting, I decided to prepare a few elements for the driver's equipment and put them on the seat. From this piece of paper tissue I will prepare a bright rack. After soaking in pigment cement, I lightly dried it and put it on the seat. In addition, a small tarp that I once made from the remains of an epoxy putty, a submachine gun and a canteen. That's quite enough. The rope is already dry, so I apply a little wash to emphasize its weave. At the same time, light brown gives it the right look. After drying, the black acrylic wash will do the full job of penetrating into the cavities. For me, the effect is great. A great addition are the empty shells from Master Model, which I intended to scatter on the floor of the flatbed. But before I do that, I cover them with a black and brown wash. After drying, they are ready to be placed on the model. I decided that they should be at the edges. Logic told me so. I mean, most likely the crew would get rid of them completely, but once they are in this place, they should be arranged in this way, in my opinion. A bit of pigment cement applied with a thin brush is enough to hold the shells in place, especially since this glue is completely invisible after drying. A bit snobbish, but I decided to use second set of shells to complete the basket of the flak and put the rest next to the others. And of course, it couldn't be missed. A piece of chain must appear on the model. To color it, or rather to blacken it, I use liquid from AK. A little is enough to completely change the color. After a dozen or so seconds it has the right look, but you have to mix it up for a while. Notice how quickly the liquid acted and changed its appearance. Then just dry it. I immediately prepared a larger amount to have for future projects. For the model I need about 85 mm, which corresponds to about 3 meters in length. Laying on the model takes a few moments as is gluing. Once again, pigment cement will be the perfect solution. Finally, a bit of dry brushing and oil paint on the camouflage net, which has already dried completely, and I can say that OPEL is already 99% ready. I will use 3 kits to create the human factor and add life to the vehicle and the entire vignette. Plastic figures from Master Box and 2 resin figures from DGT and Alpine. As a result I have 5 soldiers. Flak service guys, driver, 1 more from the service crew and the commander. I didn't make any corrections to the resin figures, but the plastic figures needed a bit of love. The driver has a slightly modified pose and new hat. I also added the scarf, which changes his look into a racer. One of the Flak crew members has no upgrades, while the other has a resin hat and a scarf similar to the driver's. Plastic figures are not perfect and require much more work than the resin ones, but they have interesting and very natural poses that are worth using. This set is perfect for my project, so I wanted to use at least some of the figures that are there. I painted all the figures with AK Interactive acrylic paints from the 3G series. Additionally, I use washes from Modeler's World to shade the skin and uniforms. As a result, I have a Flak team in casual poses watching something in the distance. It turned out pretty nice. Summing up the whole project, I must say that I'm a bit surprised. Why? Because from very simple sets without big upgrades, I managed to build a unique vehicle, one can say irregular, not very common. In addition, a simple but very suggestive base, figures and an eye-catcher is ready. My next project is Sztuk 4 for wide presentation here on YouTube and one more model, but it will be available only on Patreon. Well, that's just such an incentive to check its content. That's all for today. See you next time. Cheers!